Why would a nation over 1,000 miles away from Israel, sharing not a single inch of border, be willing to risk its national destiny, endure crippling sanctions, and flirt with the brink of nuclear war just to wipe the Zionist entity off the map? The answer isn't found in diplomatic offices. It lies in an ancient decree currently being executed by cruise missile technology. Imagine standing in the middle of Palestine Square in downtown Tehran. Beneath your feet are trampled Israeli flags, and right before your eyes is a massive digital clock counting down. It's not counting down to the new year, but to the doomsday of Israel. The eyes of the Revolutionary Guards burn with an ironclad conviction that destroying Israel is not a political option, but a divine mandate from above. As night falls, mobile launchers silently move into deep underground bunkers carved into limestone mountains. Each ballistic missile named Khaybar, or Shahab, is not merely a mass of explosives and metal. They carry an existential message of hatred. Why are Iran's leaders so obsessed with the destruction of Israel that it has become the backbone of their foreign policy? Why are they willing to pour billions of dollars, money desperately needed by their own citizens, into the pockets of Hezbollah in Lebanon, Hamas in Gaza, and Houthi rebels in Yemen, just to create a ring of fire encircling a tiny nation roughly the size of New Jersey? This animosity is so devastating that it defies all conventional logic. Iran and Israel have no disputes over water resources, no territorial conflicts. So what turned a country that was once Israel's closest ally in the Middle East into its sworn enemy overnight in 1979? Why do they call Israel the Little Satan? A term steeped more in apocalyptic religious fervor than diplomacy. To understand the roar of today's missile engines, we must travel back 4,000 years to an era where decisions made in a desert tent are directly controlling the fingers resting on missile launch buttons in Tehran today. Let's leave behind the chaos of the modern news cycle and step into a world of solid gold and marble. The year is 539 BC, inside the magnificent capital of Susa in the Achaemenid Empire. Here, we meet the greatest emperor in Iranian history, Cyrus the Great. This is the great paradox that history has orchestrated. In the darkest moment of the Jewish people, when Jerusalem had been leveled by Babylon, Solomon's temple was reduced to ashes, and the last Jews were withering away in the chains of slavery. It was the Persians, the direct ancestors of the Iranians, who appeared as angels of deliverance. Cyrus did not march into Babylon to add more chains to the Jews. Instead, he did something that shook history. He issued a decree to liberate them, allowed them to return to their homeland, and even more astonishingly, he used the Persian royal treasury to fund the rebuilding of the temple for their god. The Bible records the unthinkable in the book of Isaiah, chapter 45. God called Cyrus, a pagan king who had never known the law of Moses, by his highest title, my anointed. In Hebrew, that word is Mashiach, or Messiah. Pause and feel the weight of this truth. Iran was once the sole protector, the greatest benefactor that saved the nation of Israel from total annihilation. Even when Jesus was born in Bethlehem, it was the Magi, the high-ranking astrologers and priests of Persia, who were the first to recognize the strange star, traversing thousands of miles of desert to bow down and offer him gold and frankincense. So, how did a nation once called a Messiah by God turn into a nation sworn to wipe his people off the map? How did the bloodline that once flowed to protect the temple become the very bloodline boiling to destroy it? The answer lies in a dark entity that has quietly possessed the soul of this land for millennia. A supernatural force, biding its time for the perfect moment to betray its own glorious history. To understand why Iran did a complete 180, we must look past the material veil into a dimension that the spy satellites of Mossad or the CIA could never reach. We are on the banks of the Tigris River. The prophet Daniel is prostrate, his body exhausted, reduced to skin and bones after 21 days of fasting and weeping for the fate of his people. Suddenly, space bends, and an entity shining like lightning appears. But this angel brings shocking news. He had been intercepted on his way by a powerful force known as the Prince of the Kingdom of Persia. Daniel chapter 10 reveals a chilling truth for modern audiences. This was no flesh and blood king. This was a dark lord, a high-ranking demonic entity, a territorial spirit, ruling over the land of Iran. God's angel had to fight a breathless 21-day battle and could only break through the siege when the archangel Michael, the chief prince who protects Israel, arrived as reinforcements. This reveals a profound reality. Today's Israel-Iran conflict didn't begin in the meetings of the UN Security Council. It began in the heavenly realms. The Prince of Persia is a real entity, a spiritual enemy constantly seeking to block every blessing God has for Israel. When Iran transitioned from a close ally of Israel to a hostile theocracy in 1979, it wasn't just a political revolution. It was the moment this dark entity rose up, seizing the minds of the leadership and twisting the protective legacy of Cyrus into apocalyptic hatred. This conflict cannot be solved through diplomacy, because you cannot sign a nuclear deal with a fallen angel. Today's Iran is merely the physical instrument of a supernatural entity desperately trying to overturn the verdict of history. To understand why Iran, a non-Arab nation, is so zealous in its shared hostility toward Israel, we must return to a scorching afternoon in the desert of Beersheba. We see Hagar looking desperately at her son Ishmael as he slowly fades under a shrub. Ishmael wasn't just the patriarch of nations. He was a child carrying a broken heart. For the first 13 years of his life, Ishmael was the sole prince in Abraham's heart. He was loved by his father and promised a great future. But then, Isaac was born. Overnight, Ishmael was stripped of his status and banished into the desert, with nothing but a flask of water and a little bread. Though God saved Ishmael's life and promised to make him a great nation, he also delivered a chilling prophecy. His hand will be against everyone, and everyone's hand against him. Genesis 16:12. This was the genesis of an identity built on resentment and a profound sense of rejection. This animosity only deepened when Esau, the firstborn whose birthright was taken by Jacob, Israel, sought out Ishmael and married his daughter. This forged an alliance of the rejected. They echoed each other's pain, creating a united front of those who felt victimized by God's preference for Israel. When the Persians embraced Islam, they inadvertently inherited all of Ishmael's wounds. They channeled the pride of a great empire to amplify the pain of the forsaken son, framing the goal of destroying Israel as a form of divine justice to reclaim the blessings they believed were stolen. In the shadows of the ancient palace of Susa, there is the rustling of genocidal decrees. A man named Haman bows down to his own arrogance, drafting a plot to exterminate all the Jews in a single day. Haman was an Agagite, a direct descendant of King Agag, the ruler of the ruthless Amalekites. In the Bible, Amalek is more than just a people. It is a spiritual symbol of an enemy that attacks God's people from behind, preying on the elderly, the weak, and the exhausted. When Haman entered the Persian political arena, he carried with him the ancient genocidal DNA of Amalek. He harbored an irrational hatred for the Jewish people, a hatred that defied all political or economic logic. The showdown between Haman and Queen Esther was fundamentally a battle between light and darkness, right at the heart of the Iranian land. Haman failed and was hanged on the very gallows he had built for the Jews. But the spirit of Amalek never died. It operates like a spiritual virus, constantly seeking a powerful nation to serve as its host. When the supreme leaders in Tehran today declare that Israel is a cancer that must be excised, or when they call for a referendum to wipe out the Zionist entity, that is the voice of Haman echoing across millennia. The spirit of Amalek has parasitized the power structure of modern Iran, turning a nation that was once Israel's benefactor into a cruise missile launchpad for genocidal hatred. This isn't 21st century politics. This is Haman's decree, modernized with nuclear ambitions. There is a truth that Iran's modern clerics want to scrub from the history books. For over 1,000 years, Iran was not a prison for the Jewish people, but their intellectual capital. How does a friendship spanning 10 centuries shatter in just a few decades? Picture long-bearded Jewish scholars poring over parchment scrolls in the academies of Babylon and Pumbedita. The year is somewhere in the 4th or 5th century AD, under the rule of the Sassanid Empire, the Persians. It was right here, on the soil of modern-day Iran, that the great Babylonian Talmud, the bedrock of modern Jewish law, was compiled and perfected. The Persians and the Jews weren't just neighbors, they were strategic partners. Jews held prominent positions in the Persian royal court, and Persian armies even fought side by side with the Jews to reclaim Jerusalem from the Byzantine Empire. But then, a sandstorm from the Arabian Peninsula swept it all away. In 651 AD, the Zoroastrian Persian Empire collapsed under the march of Islamic armies. The crescent moon replaced the fiery emblem of the Persian eagles. This was a seismic geopolitical and spiritual turning point. Persia, a proud Aryan nation, was subjugated by an Arab faith. By embracing Islam, the Iranians inadvertently inherited the wound of Ishmael we discussed earlier. In this new paradigm, Ishmael was no longer the outcast son. He was viewed as the true heir of Abraham. A non-Arab nation had adopted an Arab religion, and to prove their devotion, they gradually weaponized Ishmael's resentment into Persia's righteous cause. Yet this spirit of hatred had not entirely possessed the land. It continued to smolder beneath the ashes, waiting for a fateful moment in the 20th century to ignite into a global conflagration. Look at the black and white photographs of Tehran in 1975. You will see a completely different world. Women walking the streets in miniskirts, movie theaters screening Hollywood blockbusters, and direct flights from Tel Aviv to Tehran. Under Shah Pahlavi, Iran was Israel's closest ally. Iranian oil flowed into Israel, while Israeli agricultural experts helped Iran make the desert bloom. The protective mantle of Cyrus the Great seemed to still be intact. But in the shadows, the entity Daniel called the Prince of Persia was sharpening its blade. In 1979, the Islamic Revolution struck like an earthquake. The Shah fled. Ayatollah Khomeini returned from exile. In a matter of months, Iran mutated from a modern, secular nation into a rigid, clerical theocracy. But pay close attention. The first and most aggressive target of this revolution wasn't the economy. It was Israel. The Israeli embassy in Tehran was seized and handed over to the Palestine Liberation Organization. The Star of David was torn down, replaced by a sign reading, Death to Israel. Why would an internal revolution be so obsessed with a nation thousands of miles away? Analysts call it politics, but the Bible calls it the rise of a principality. The spiritual entity that had blocked Daniel's angel reclaimed its throne. Since 1979, Iran has ceased to be a normal nation. It has become a spiritual instrument, a launch pad for apocalyptic hatred aimed squarely at the center of God's plan, the nation of Israel. Now, open the book of Ezekiel, chapter 38. Written 2,600 years ago, this prophecy reads like this morning's headlines. Ezekiel describes a terrifying invasion of Israel in the latter days. And guess which nation tops the list of that coalition? Persia, modern-day Iran. Ezekiel prophesied that Persia would ally with Gog of the land of Magog, widely understood as Russia, and Togarma, Turkey, alongside Sudan and Libya. Look at today's geopolitical map. Iran and Russia share the tightest military relationship in their history. Iranian UAVs are flying in the skies over Ukraine, traded for Russian nuclear and missile technology. Turkey is steadily drifting away from the West to align closer to this bloc. Ezekiel describes this alliance advancing like a storm, covering the land like a cloud. Their objective? To annihilate Israel after its people have been regathered in the Promised Land following centuries of exile. This is no coincidence. For the first time in 2,600 years, all the nations named by Ezekiel have formed an actual military alliance targeting Israel. We are no longer reading history. We are witnessing the preparations for the final battle. The Prince of Persia is leading Iran into a trap of destiny, where human arrogance will collide head-on with the mighty hand of God on the mountains of Israel. In the book of Jeremiah, chapter 49, there is a strange and lesser-known prophecy specifically concerning the land of Elam, the ancient name for southwestern Iran, home to Iran's most critical nuclear facilities and missile bases today. God declares, "I will break the bow of Elam, the mainstay of their might." In the ancient world, Elam was renowned for its expert archers. Today, Iran's bow is its ballistic missile program and nuclear ambitions, the pride and the mainstay of might of the clerical regime. God promises to bring devastating destruction upon its leaders and military installations. The hatred Iran sows will boomerang, destroying the very foundation of their power. But wait, here is the point that competing videos miss. The prophecy of Elam isn't just about ashes. Jeremiah 49:39 ends with a profound note of hope. But in the latter days, I will restore the fortunes of Elam. God has no intention of destroying the Iranian people. He wants to destroy the demonic system ruling over them. God promises to set his throne in Elam. This points to a massive spiritual overthrow within Iran. Before the battle of Gog and Magog erupts, God is preparing something earth-shattering from deep within the Iranian nation, a restoration that no politician could ever see coming. While satellites track missile launchers in Tehran, a massive spiritual harvest is taking place in dark basements and secret underground gatherings. Iran is currently home to the fastest-growing Christian church in the world. Why? Step inside an ordinary house in downtown Shiraz. A group of Iranians is whispering prayers. If caught, they face the death penalty. But they are not afraid. When asked why they believe in Jesus, the God of Israel, the answer is always the same. I saw him in a dream. Thousands of Iranians, from university students to veteran Revolutionary Guards, are reporting encounters with a man in white, radiating boundless love in their sleep. God is fulfilling his promise to set his throne in Elam right now. While the Iranian regime prepares for war, the Iranian people are preparing for reconciliation. A new generation of Iranians is rising up. A generation that no longer carries the wound of Ishmael or the spirit of Haman. They realize that the blessing of Isaac is not a threat, but the fulfillment of their own destiny. The story of the animosity between Israel and Iran will not end in a nuclear blast that wipes out humanity. It will end in the fulfillment of prophecy. Isaac and Ishmael sitting together at the same table. The betrayal of the Prince of Persia will be broken by the return of the King of Kings. Iran will once again become the nation of the Magi, bringing gold and frankincense to bow at the feet of the Messiah. The journey from hatred to restoration has already begun, not with guns and bullets, but with dreams and silent prayers in the dark. Do you believe this story will end in ashes or in a great reconciliation? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe so you never miss our documentaries decoding the destiny of nations.